the second-generation American immigrants in North Korea. The Korean Peninsula, a land divided not only by ideology, but by blood, sacrifice, and betrayal. For decades, the line that separates North and South Korea has stood as one of the most dangerous borders on Earth, a place where history froze in 1953, and the shadows of the Cold War continue to breathe life into propaganda. But hidden behind the slogans, the military parades, and the portraits of supreme leaders exists a far stranger story, one that few have dared to tell in full. This is not the story of North Korea's leaders. This is not the story of its secret police or its prison camps. This is the story of the Americans who voluntarily crossed into North Korea, and of their children, born into a world where freedom was not a concept, but an enemy. Some found escape, some remain captives, and some have vanished entirely. This is the second-generation American immigrants in North Korea. Part 1. The choice to cross. In the early 1960s, against the tense backdrop of the Cold War, 4 American soldiers stationed in South Korea made a decision that stunned their homeland. They defected, not to the Soviet Union, not to China, but to North Korea. They were not kidnapped. They were not forced. They crossed of their own volition. Their names were James Joseph Dresnok, Charles Robert Jenkins, Larry Allen Abshire, and Jerry Wayne Parrish. Each man's reasons were different, but all shared a common thread: fear, desperation, and the illusion that life on the other side might offer something that the United States could not. James Dresnok's choice was perhaps the most iconic. In 1962, facing a court-martial for forging his sergeant's signature and fearing a return home in disgrace, he made a sudden, irreversible decision. On a humid August afternoon, he walked directly across the heavily fortified, demilitarized zone. In later interviews, Dresnok described the moment simply: "I had no place to go. I was trapped. The only way was north." Larry Abshire had crossed a few months earlier, in May 1962. Jerry Parrish followed in December 1963. And finally, Charles Jenkins, perhaps the most famous of them all, defected in 1965, slipping away from his unit under cover of darkness. But North Korea was not the utopia they imagined. What awaited them was not freedom, but a different kind of captivity. Part 2. Life inside the regime. The North Korean regime quickly recognized the propaganda value of these defectors. Here were American soldiers, the very symbol of imperialism, now standing on the side of the People's Revolution. Their existence served the narrative that capitalism was crumbling, and that even its own agents sought refuge under Kim Il-sung's leadership. But life inside the regime was carefully choreographed. The defectors were under constant surveillance. They were kept in isolated compounds, assigned Korean handlers, and subjected to continuous ideological re-education. Their existence was paradoxical. On the surface, they were paraded as honored guests, given housing, food, and limited privileges. But in reality, they lived as prisoners of circumstance, constantly watched, constantly reminded of the price of disobedience. The defectors were forced to star in North Korean propaganda films. Most famously, they appeared in Unsung Heroes, a multi-part war epic that depicted the Americans as bumbling, immoral villains while glorifying the North Korean struggle. For over a decade, these 4 Americans were inseparable. They shared meals, classrooms, and even living quarters. In an environment where trust was weaponized, their shared language and background became their only tether to sanity. But even that fragile brotherhood was not immune to the regime's manipulation. The state controlled not only their physical movements, but their personal lives as well. They were eventually assigned wives, women who themselves were often victims of North Korea's global abduction campaigns. Part 3. the wives they never chose. North Korea's policy of bringing foreign women into the country was neither accidental nor rare. In its attempt to manufacture loyalty and control, the regime abducted dozens of foreign nationals, Japanese, Romanian, Lebanese, Thai, and assigned them to serve the state in various capacities. James Dresnok was married to Doina Bumbea, a Romanian painter who had been lured to North Korea under false promises of artistic work abroad. Once inside the country, she was never permitted to leave. Charles Jenkins was assigned to Hitomi Soga, a young Japanese woman who, along with her mother, had been abducted by North Korean agents in 1978 while walking home from a local market. Jerry Parrish married a Lebanese woman. Larry Abshir was also married by the state to a foreign woman, but they had no children before he died in 1983. None of these unions were the result of courtship. They were state-arranged partnerships designed to produce loyal, mixed-race citizens that could serve the regime's long-term propaganda needs. In these forced unions, the second generation of American defectors was born. The children, the true focus of our story, would never know their parents' former lives, nor would they ever have a choice about the world they were raised in. Part 4. Born into control. For the second generation, there was no defecting. They were born inside the system. The sins of their fathers were irrelevant. Their existence was molded from the moment they could speak. James Dresnok Jr. and Ted Dresnok, the sons of James Joseph Dresnok and Doina Bumbea, never knew the Western world. Korean was their first language. Kim Il-sung was their eternal leader. American blood ran in their veins, but they were raised to see America as the enemy. From childhood, the children of defectors were both a curiosity and a tool. In a nation where uniformity was enforced with absolute precision, their mixed heritage made them stand out. Their skin was lighter. Their facial features were different. But their usefulness to the regime outweighed these superficial differences. The state ensured that these children would serve as living proof that even the offspring of America could be turned into loyal sons of Husha. In school, they were provided with resources unavailable to ordinary North Korean children. Private tutors, controlled education, and early military indoctrination became their world. But this privilege was transactional. It bought loyalty. It secured silence. There was never a question of escape. The regime's grip was absolute. Any dissent, even perceived dissent, would not only bring punishment upon them, but would endanger their families, friends, and teachers. Control was not maintained through violence alone. It was enforced by the unspoken terror of collective punishment. Defectors' children were assigned handlers early. State agents embedded themselves into every layer of their lives, from education to social circles to career assignments. One former North Korean intelligence officer, who defected himself years later, described the children of foreigners as being watched more closely than anyone else. Their unique position offered both privilege and a constant sword hanging over their heads. Part 5. The Jenkins Family. An Unlikely Escape. The story of Charles Jenkins' children followed a different trajectory, one rare exception in the otherwise totalitarian machine. Mika and Brenda Jenkins were born in Pyongyang in the 1980s, daughters of an American soldier and a Japanese abductee. Their early lives mirrored that of the Dresnok boys, state-controlled, highly supervised, but with access to better food, medicine, and education than the average North Korean citizen. But their fate changed when Japan applied increasing diplomatic pressure on North Korea in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The Japanese government had, by then, uncovered the extent of North Korea's abduction program, a decades-long operation where Japanese civilians were kidnapped from coastal towns and villages to serve as teachers, translators, and breeding partners for agents in training. Hitomi Soga's name was among those brought into international negotiations. After intense back-channel diplomacy, North Korea reluctantly agreed to release a small number of abductees as part of a rare act of goodwill designed to open the door to foreign aid. In 2002, Hitomi Soga was permitted to return to Japan, but her husband and daughters remained trapped. Charles Jenkins, fearing arrest and punishment if he attempted to leave with them, stayed behind. For 2 more years, the family remained divided. Only after additional diplomatic intervention and guarantees of leniency from the U.S. military did Jenkins risk traveling to Jakarta in 2004, a neutral site arranged for his reunion with Soga. There, Jenkins finally surrendered to U.S. military authorities. He was court-martialed and received a reduced sentence. 30 days confinement and dishonorable discharge, far lighter than he had long feared. For the first time in their lives, Mika and Brenda Jenkins stepped into a free society, Japan. But freedom came at a psychological cost. They had grown up under an entirely different set of values. The outside world, with its consumerism, freedoms, and personal choices, was alien to them. Adapting would take years. In rare interviews given later, Jenkins spoke of the difficulty his daughters faced. They had never seen so many people. They didn't understand why no one was watching them, why no one was following them. The trauma of indoctrination lingers even after the chains are broken. Part 6. The Dresnik Brothers, remaining inside the machine. The fate of the Dresnik brothers took a far darker and more predictable path. Following the death of their mother, Doina Bombea, in the 1990s, James Jr. and Ted Dresnik were raised solely under the care of the state and their father. James Dresnik remained deeply loyal to the regime until his death in 2016. Whether his loyalty was genuine or necessary is a question that may never be fully answered. His sons, however, continued to serve the state. By the 2010s, both James Jr. and Ted were integrated fully into the North Korean military. Publicly released interviews, tightly scripted and approved by the regime, showed the brothers wearing officers' uniforms, praising the leadership, and condemning the United States. In 2016, in one of the last known appearances, James Dresnik Jr. appeared on North Korean state television. "I will never betray my country. My father loved the marshal. We will protect our country as he did. The United States is the enemy." Whether these statements reflect genuine belief or a survival instinct honed from decades of life under surveillance is unknown. What is certain is that any deviation from the official narrative would bring catastrophic consequences. There is no independent confirmation of their lives beyond these state-orchestrated performances. The regime's control over foreign children like the Dresniks serves multiple purposes: as propaganda, as hostages, and as pawns in the regime's ongoing psychological war against the West. As of today, James Jr. and Ted Dresnik remain in North Korea. Their fates are sealed by geography, history, and a regime that has weaponized their very existence. Part 7. The Children's Legacy. As the decades passed, the existence of the American defectors faded from mainstream headlines. But for their children, the second generation, the struggle for identity remained an ever-present shadow. The Jenkins daughters, Mika and Brenda, today live quiet lives in Japan. Having fully assimilated into Japanese society, they maintain minimal public profiles. Mika has worked in healthcare. Brenda has pursued office work. Occasionally, brief interviews have surfaced, hinting at the cultural dissonance they still sometimes experience. They are, by all legal standards, fully Japanese citizens. But the North Korean chapter of their lives remains an inescapable scar, one they rarely discuss in detail. For the Dresnik brothers, the story is far murkier. Since 2017, there has been no credible independent information about James Jr. or Ted Dresnok. No foreign journalists have seen them. No outside reports confirm their well-being. Their existence is now limited to archived footage from state-run interviews and propaganda clips. However, occasional satellite intelligence and defectors whispers suggest they continue to serve roles within the North Korean military, possibly in foreign language intelligence, propaganda units, or as training instructors for operatives targeting Western nations. If the Dresnok brothers have married and produced children of their own, a third generation, no such descendants have been publicly identified. But given the regime's tendency to control and conceal sensitive bloodlines, it is possible that a small number of individuals today carry American bloodlines deep within Pyongyang's hidden elite. The lineage of Jerry Parish's family is also shrouded in secrecy. While it is known he had sons, their current status and lives within the North Korean system are completely undocumented and unknown to the outside world. Unlike the children of Jenkins or Dresnok, they have not been part of diplomatic negotiations or state propaganda, leaving their fates a mystery. North Korea's secret police, the feared Ministry of State Security, would almost certainly have suppressed any trace of these descendants from public record, leaving only speculation behind. Part 8. Secrets that may never be known. The full story of the second-generation American immigrants in North Korea may never be entirely uncovered. So much remains locked behind Pyongyang's impenetrable walls, files classified by the regime, birth records altered or destroyed, surveillance tapes stored in archives that may never see the light of day. American intelligence agencies have maintained sporadic files on the defectors for decades, but even these are fragmented. The potential for the second generation to be used as covert psychological or diplomatic assets remains a chilling possibility, though no known case has publicly surfaced. Inside North Korea, their names are likely known only to trusted officials. The ordinary North Korean citizen is unlikely even to be aware of their existence. What remains, then, is not only a mystery, but a study in what happens when personal decisions intersect with totalitarian machinery. In the end, the story of the second-generation American immigrants in North Korea is not simply about defection. It is about the multi-generational consequences of individual choices made in desperation, under fear, or for idealistic reasons that quickly collapsed under the weight of reality. The original defectors, Dresnok, Jenkins, Abshir, and Parish, each faced very different ends. Some found redemption, others remained trapped until death. But it was their children who bore the longest sentence. For the Dresnok brothers, life remains behind the mask of state loyalty. Their American roots have become a quiet tool of propaganda, useful so long as they serve the regime's narrative. Their freedom is an illusion, their lives closely managed from birth. For the Jenkins daughters, freedom came, but not without scars. The process of re-entry into the free world is never instant. Trauma, indoctrination, and cultural dissonance linger long after escape. For the children of Jerry Parish, their stories may already be buried in Pyongyang's closed system, lost, assimilated, and invisible to the outside world. In North Korea, identity is not inherited. It is assigned. And for the few born of American blood, that assignment has always carried unique danger. They remain artifacts of Cold War tension, living reminders of a moment when the ideological battle between two worlds played out not only on battlefields, but inside human lives. And as the 21st century moves forward, these rare children of American defectors remain one of the most bizarre, tragic, and secret chapters of North Korea's brutal history.